So here it is. This is a portion of all the resources I've been using over the last 30 years. This does not include English and French because I learned these languages at school, but it includes German and all the other languages I've been learning since 1996. So let's start by talking about the resources I used for Deutsch. Hallo mein lieber Freund. So let's get started. Here we have the very first resource that I used, which is called De Agostini. Now, as you can see, these two resources, they're pretty much the same, one for German, one for Spanish. I started learning German in 1996, and I started learning Spanish with the very same course practically in 1998. Now, why is this course so cool? Well, I'm going to show you first the intermediate stage and then the advanced stage. The intermediate stage has to do with dialogues, and you can see here pretty much these nice dialogues, conversation, just a simple conversation, and then you have, this is in German, and then you have some nice pictures, and then you have a section of vocabulary here, and then you have a section, for example, dialogue, and this is just another conversation, and then you have key, the exercises key, meaning that you do the exercises and then you got the answers, so you can test yourself whether you did well or not on grammar. This is pretty nice, but the part that I prefer the most, and I'm going to show you the part in Spanish, is actually the advanced course. So why is this so cool? Because in the advanced course, it basically, as you can see here, the course starts with a movie script. So it's a 10-minute movie script, and as you can see here, there's some screenshots of the movie, and then you have the dialogues, and then you have some nice explanations or grammar notes of the dialogues themselves. As you can see here. And then you have Español para especialistas. So this is for if you want to improve your Spanish when it comes to using Spanish at work. And then you have some grammar explanations, and then you have Español en vivo. Let me give an example of this. Ya te has pulido toda la pasta. It's an expression, right? Ya te has gastado todo el sueldo. So, ya te has pulido toda la pasta is a colloquial expression to say ya te has gastado todo el sueldo, which means you have wasted all your money. So, it's like colloquialisms and the language as it is actually used in real life, which is pretty cool. Then you have el uso de la lengua, you have some exercises, and then you have, last but not least, you have some literature. So for those who love, for example, reading books, you also have entire sections of books, and these are bilingual. So you have Spanish here, and in my case Italian, because this course was made for Italians, was made for Italians like me who wanted to learn Spanish. Fun fact, every time that I tell, especially Spaniards, when they ask me, ¿Cómo has aprendido español? I say, con el planeta de Agostini, because in Spain they call it planeta de Agostini. Well, we call it just curso de Agostini. And they go like, oh, wow, how is that possible? Wow, es imposible. Because for them, just learning with a course, you're supposed to learn a language at school, or if you go and live in country, if you talk to a lot of people. I learned German and Spanish with these two courses, and particularly for German, after learning for 2 years, I was in Sardinia, and as I recount and talk about this, I talk about this in the book, I met a girl and I thanked El Planeta de Agostini, Il Mondo de Agostini, the world de Agostini, for giving me the opportunity of learning German, because that allowed me not only to get to know this wonderful German girl, but also to get to know a lot of friends, a lot of German friends. So these are the two languages I started learning in 1996 and 1998. Now let's talk about Dutch and Swedish, which are the languages that I learned next. So let's move on to this resource. As you can see here, this is called Teach Yourself Dutch. And this is practically the only book I found when I started learning Dutch. Fun fact, and I don't, don't judge me, but I started learning, Nederlands because of a meisje, because of a girl. I fell in love with this girl always in Sardinia, in the same summer camp where I had, met my German girl, but a year later, and she didn't speak English that well, so I just decided, you know what, I already know some German, why not try my hand at Nederlands, Dutch. And so here it is, and I used this one. I really loved the audio, and I normally don't use Teach Yourself anymore. You can see here, I started in 1999, and I used to highlight big chunks of the dialogues and write on the border of the page as I do now. Here it is, and I really like this Teach Yourself. So Teach Yourself is a great resource. It's made basically of dialogues and then just some exercises. You have a vocabulary section here, and what I really liked about this was the audiobandes. So audiobandes is the audio that comes with this resource, because it was just in Nederlands. Now you might say, what do you mean? Of course it's just in Dutch. Well, not so fast. The reason why the audio was great is because it was just in Nederlands, and Nederlands is the language that is spoken in Holland. While this other resource, which I used for always to learn Nederlands, as you can see here, you have they call it Tome 1 and Tome 2, so Book 1 and Book 2. As you can see here, you have two flags, not one. You have Holland, but you also have Belgium. These are great. I really like the content, but the audiobandes, again, the audio, was really confusing because they were alternating, pronunciation in Nederlands from Holland, and Vlaams. And Vlaams is the language that is spoken in Belgium, which is pretty much like Dutch, but it has a completely different pronunciation. This is like trying to learn American English and British English in the same course. It might be very confusing. And on top of that, the thing that confused me is that in the other book, which is, Teach Yourself Dutch, they used to have a certain R, while in this resource, they had a completely different R, because in Nederlands, you can say r, or like maar. Maar, it's a little bit like you're from Leiden. You're a little bit, posh. And then you have le r, and you have the all mixed. So that was a little bit confusing, but this resource was absolutely fabulous. And then we have same thing happened with Swedish, svenska. So this is one of my favorite languages. I love Swedish, everything Scandinavian. I started learning Swedish in 2002, if I remember correctly, and that was a gift from my ex-girlfriend, who is Italian, and she knew that, my love for languages, and I had been toying with the idea of learning Swedish. So she gave me this book, Teach Yourself, which I used because I had already used Teach Yourself Dutch, and it's a great resource. So I started using this one, and then I started using Le Suédois sans peine. You might notice that this one is in English, this one is in French, because Assimil is actually a resource. It's a French resource, it's a French company, and for some languages that are kind of exotic, and I believe that Swedish is a little bit exotic, not a lot of people learn Swedish. There's just 8 million people in Sweden. So not a lot of people decide to learn Swedish. It's in French, it's not in other languages. This is 2002, so I don't know if they made other versions, but I had to make do, as they say, and thank God I could speak French. So I could use French to learn Swedish. Now, I want you to take a look here. You can see the dialogue, and the great thing about Assimil is that not only that they have, for example, grammar notes that explain points that are difficult to understand just by comparing your target language and the language you're learning, but it also, and this is not something that a lot of courses do, it makes, for example, you can see here, some syllables are in bold. And why are they in bold? They're in bold because they're stressed syllables. So, for example, here, if you say nej, tack, tack is, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. It stresses the fact that thank you is stressed. Tack. Or if you can see here, always looking at the very first line here. And we say, vi tänker inte cykla. Vi tänker inte cykla. So su is stressed, kla is not stressed. This is a feature of Asimil, and it's a great feature to understand how pronunciation works. That was 2002, if I remember correctly. And then for 6 years, I did not do much until I started making videos on YouTube in 2008. Now, when I did my first video on YouTube, I had been learning actually, and now that I think about it, I started learning Russian in 2004, and I learned for 1 year and a half. I was very discouraged. I'm going to tell you this in the story a little bit, in a bit. And then when I made the first video on YouTube, including Russian, the reaction of people was so nice that I said, you know what, I'm going to start, learning languages again. And I started again learning Russian. Literally, you guys' enthusiasm reignited my desire to learn foreign languages. So now you might have probably have figured out that I like Asimil because I use it all the time. So I did not use Teach Yourself anymore. I started using Asimil all the time. As you can see here, this is il nuovo russo senza sforzo, which in Italian means new Russian with ease, basically. Nuovo russo senza sforzo. And this is, I think there's two books, but I just got the first one here. As you can see, this book is exactly like the other ones. I'm just going to show you an example. You have the dialogue in Russian, you have the dialogue in Italian, you have the grammar explanations. This is a great book. It's one of the best versions of Asimil, and I used that for a year, actually for 8 months. And then I used other resources, but I had to spend 4 years without doing anything for Russian until, again, as I told you, YouTube changed it all. But this is a story for another time. Let's move on to the next resource. So the next resources that I used are for 2 languages. That was the very first time in my life that I started learning 2 languages at the same time. And I have a very nice article about this. A lot of people ask me, how do you learn 2 languages at the same time? What do you have to do? Is that possible? I believe that it's possible, but you have to, let's say, follow certain principles. You want to abide by or stick to certain rules, or I call them rules of thumb, that are going to help you, because learning 1 language is already a difficult thing. Learning 2 languages is going to be even more complicated. So here it is. Ta-da! So you have on the right side, you have Il Nuovo Portoghese Senza Sforzo. So Portuguese with Ease by the series of Asimil. And then you have the new edition of Teach Yourself. And the truth is, I've never used the second one. So this one, I just skimmed through it. Skimmed through it. While I used, Portuguese with Ease. It was great, fantastic resource. I loved it. Portuguese from Portugal, Portuguese Portugal. A lot of Brazilians here will ask me, why? What did you learn Portuguese from Portugal? They ask me all the time, and they always say, por que o Português de Portugal é tão chato? Meaning that a lot of people don't find Portuguese from Portugal very nice, especially the pronunciation. I love it. De gustibus disputandum non est, we say in Italian, Everybody's got their own taste. And now we have Il Cinese Senza Sforzo. So you can see this is the book number 1. I have also book number 2, which I'm gonna grab right now. Let's switch them. So starting from the right, Il Cinese Senza Sforzo. Starting from the left, the left is Il Cinese Senza Sforzo, volume numero 2. I'm just gonna give you an idea of how this is going to look inside. For example, the difference between this and other European languages is that Chinese has the infamous Chinese characters. Not only that, but it also has tones. So for example, if you have never heard Chinese, or you have no idea, well, I'm pretty sure you've heard Chinese somewhere, but if you have no idea of how the tone system works, the tone system works in the following way. Every word or every syllable can be pronounced with different pitches. For example, ma, 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 ma. These are all 4 different tones, meaning that your vocal cords vibrate and produce different frequencies. So I really like the fact that, Asimil presents the dialogues with the Chinese characters, but you also have pinyin, so you can actually see the characters. Otherwise, it would be really difficult to understand how they're supposed to be pronounced. And of course, you have the audio. So here, for example, you can say 这个, you've got a falling tone 这个人. So this person 很热情. You can see 这个人很热情. You can see the characters, the pinyin, and you also have, of course, not only the translation into your native language, in this case it's mine, is Italian, but also the literal translation, which makes Asimil so good, because you might look at the translation and get confused about which element corresponds to which one, but once you see the literal translation, you see a perfect one-to-one correspondence. And on top of that, you also have, of course, grammar explanations. Now, one important note about this, I like it, I found it great, but there's not a lot of content compared with other European languages. So with 2 books, maybe you cover the content that you would cover in half a book of Portuguese or Swedish. That's the only thing, only beef I have with this. And the other fun fact, when I started learning Chinese, I remember that I spent a lot of time, an awful amount of time, trying to get the tones right. And what happened is that when we're sitting down, was my father, my mother, and you know, the family, I used to work with tones with my hands. So I used to say 这个人 just before eating. And my father was looking at me and said, what the hell is going on? Because I hadn't told him that I was learning Chinese. So for like 2 or 3 months, I was doing this 这个人中国, and my father thought I had lost my mind. But I almost lost my mind learning Chinese. But at the end of the day, I survived. And now we have another one of my crazy endeavors, crazy things I did when it comes to language learning, which is to try to learn Japanese, and try to learn Japanese together with, ta-da, Romanian. So not only was I learning a very difficult language, an SOV language, subject, object, verb. So just to give an example, in Japanese, you will never say I am eating an apple, but you should say I, an apple, am eating. And this is the easiest sentence I can come up with in Japanese. But as I was saying before, I also try to learn it together with Romanian. And let me tell you the problems I had. Japanese, I just addressed it in a way that was not supposed to be addressed, meaning my approach was not good and was discouraging. After a year, I was really struggling. Like normally, it's not difficult for me to produce sentences, but with Japanese, I had to think for 30 seconds before producing a sentence. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but probably have, like everybody else. It was really discouraging. And this version of Asimil is not really good. Normally, when someone asks me, what is the one resource you should start with? I always say Asimil, and not for Japanese, not for a lot of Asian languages, unfortunately. You know, so give credit where credit is due, but in this case, I would say that Japanese Asimil is not a good resource to start with because it offers sentences from the get-go that are really complicated. I'm going to show you another resource that I would start with definitely. And the other problem was Romanian. Romanian is not difficult for an Italian. This book is fantastic. It has all the good features of an excellent Asimil resource. It's just that I was not motivated enough to learn Romanian, again, as I recount and talk about in my book. Why did I fail learning Romanian? Because my motive or my motives were not strong enough. So this is kind of a failed experiment, but at the same time, you always learn. I always see the bright light. The bright side of things, or the silver lining, and I was happy that I did that. One more thing about Japanese. This is a much cooler resource, Japanese sentence patterns for effective communication. And if you learn how this works, even if you're not learning Japanese, you should get this book because you're going to understand how to start speaking by communicating well. You know, we tend to think that when we talk, we have to speak perfectly, but you can actually be a very effective communicator just by using the stuff you know in any language. And if I could go back in time, I would definitely start with this one book for learning Japanese. And the other one, I could not find it. I don't know what happened with the other one that is for Chinese, but the concept is the same. Another thing that is a recommendation. I don't know if you want to learn characters, but if you want to learn to handwrite characters, then you should get a book that is specific for that one skill. Because speaking a language is one thing, being able to handwrite Chinese or Japanese characters, it's a skill on its own. You have to learn how to draft each character in its correct order, and all the strokes follow a given order. I bought this, never used it, but this is another this is another matter. And the reason why I've never used it is because I never felt the necessity of learning to handwrite. You can simply type Chinese characters or Japanese characters for that matter. So, oh, I just killed Pinocchio. And then you have Polish. Now, you might be wondering why I have il polacco senza sforzo, and another polacco senza sforzo. And the truth is, I don't know why I have two, but these are actually different versions. I don't remember who bought this. I was not the one who bought this one, but the concept is exactly the same. The way of learning, the method is exactly the same. The content is slightly different because Assimil changes the content every 10 years. So you have different versions. To me, the older versions are way better than the new version or the new versions. So I started learning this in 2012, I think, because of a fateful trip I made in Poland. I met Richard Simcott, whom everybody knows, the famous polyglot, in Poznan. And I had a fantastic time, and I told myself, this is a cool country. These are cool people. And I told myself, Luca, you want to learn this language? Best investment of my life. So il polacco senza sforzo, Polish with ease. The structure is pretty much the same as all the other courses. This course is excellent as all the others for European languages. You have Polish here, you have Italian or English or German or whatever language, whatever your mother tongue is. Grammar explanations, great audio. One thing I haven't told you about Assimil is that they used to sell CDs like this one, but now you can just buy, I think, MP3 files that come with a package if you buy it on Amazon or wherever you want to buy it. So you don't need, I don't know how many people still use CDs to listen to audio, but Polish Assimil was absolutely fantastic. And then you have the last two languages. So il greco senza sforzo, ellenica, and Dansk, le danois. You can see here, one is in Italian, one is in English. In le danois, it's in French actually, because again, they made this version for Italians because the market requires it. A lot of Italians want to learn Greek. Not a lot of Italians want to learn Danish. And so this is just in Français. So the concept is pretty much the same. I want to show you just one thing, how much I actually worked on each dialogue. These are things that I do in order to dissect the text. So you might think, okay, Luca, what does this whole stuff stand for? Well, this is my way of personalizing a resource by working on it. While I listen and read, I want to, for example, mark some words that are interesting for me, and I write the meaning in Italian or in English on the border of this page, which contains the content in Greek, which is the target language. Even if I have the meaning here in Italian, it does not matter. Remember, guys, to use your hand or hands as much as possible when it comes to learning languages. You might retort, but what do you mean use your hands? Because your hand stimulates your hand. It's called hand memory, and is really powerful, not only to personalize the content of the book, to make it yours. This is mine. This is my version of Assimil. It's nobody's else. It's Luca Lampariello's version of Assimil that he worked on, and this reminds me of all the work I've been putting in over the last 30 years to learn foreign languages. So you can see here these words here on the border, and also these weird things here, arrows going up and down. This is my way of marking the intonation of Greek, or every language has intonation patterns that it's great to, let's say, identify by working on it one more time, not only with your ears, but also with your hands and with your eyes. The more senses you involve in your learning, the better. And the same thing is for Danish. Danish has a very similar structure to Swedish. The one thing that I would say about Danish is the pronunciation is hellishly difficult. So you see these words here written, pronunciation, you pronounce it in a completely different way, exactly like in English. So you can rely, of course, on this in order to understand the meaning of a dialogue by comparing and using the notes, but it's really important to pay attention, to pay close attention to how sounds are actually produced versus how they're actually written. And with this, I think we are, there's one other language I forgot. This one. This is the vision of a parliament of Magyarországon is Budapest. And this is Hungarian, Magyarország. So another great resource. Assimil is always great. Just wanted to show you something funny. It's the fact that this is a very old edition. So old, in fact, I'm just looking for the page here exactly, but it doesn't matter where it is. So old, in fact, that they talk about Soviet Union and Czechoslovakia, which do not exist anymore. But at the end of the day, the language is always the same. So if instead you use Russia or the Russian Federation instead of the Soviet Union, or Czechoslovakia instead of, Czechia, the Czech Republic, or Slovakia, it's not the end of the world. Once again, wonderful resource. You have, the structure in Hungarian, the structure in English this time, because that's the only version I found that was in English. And this is a great, fantastic resource. There are other resources to use, obviously, for Hungarian. Another one of those investments, that I'm proud of. I can pat myself on the back to say I've learned this language. I've been in Budapest 10 times. I simply love it. I highly recommend this resource, even if it's about the Soviet Union and, Slovakia and Czechoslovakia. So the books I've been showing you so far are the books I've been using to learn all the languages that I speak. But now I'm going to show you the books that I bought because of the languages I still want to learn. And let's start with this one. And this one is Larabo Fusa. I don't know if I pronounce it well, but that's Arabic. You can see here it's really thick and it looks really interesting. The Arabic script looks absolutely fascinating. The one thing about Arabic that kind of kept me from learning it is the fact that you have to learn Fusha and then you have to learn a specific dialect. They call it dialects. For me, they're real languages. Recently, I talked to Abdel, who's a friend of mine, who was saying that if you're from Morocco, people from Libya might not understand you or have a hard time understanding you from Egypt. So they're not mutually understandable, except maybe from Egyptian Arabic, because everybody watches Egyptian TV series. But in general, the bottom line is that this is not a language this is a language that nobody speaks. You can't go to a bazaar and speak Fusha. It's like me going to the market around the corner and speaking Latin, So it's a little bit discouraging, but from a cultural point of view, Arabic, I think, is a pivotal language, and I want to learn it. And this is the reason why it's here. And the other one is another Semitic language, which is Ivrit. Ivrit, Hebraico, Hebrew. Very interesting language as well. It has a script that I really, really like. As you can see here, the great thing about Assimil is how thorough the explanation is. So you can read it just as Arabic from right to left, and then you have the corresponding meaning here. Normally it's on the other side, but here it's because of how Arabic and Hebrew are built. So you literally read it from this direction and in this direction for the Italian part. And then you have the literal explanation of all the elements, which is really important to understand each element and how they're assembled together and their meaning in colloquial Italian. This is the reason why the Assimil series is one of the best series. And I've also found a very cool YouTube channel of a couple who explains, Hebrew. So it's really interesting. I'm really excited about getting into Hebrew. The third one, le persan, Farsi. The language of Iran, or Iran, or Iran, whatever you want to call it. This is one of the other languages that I really would like to learn. As you can see, like in Arabic, it has the Arabic script from right to left, and then you have the same identical structure for the Hebrew and the Arabic, meaning that you have the literal explanation that explains the elements of each sentence. Remember how important it is as a beginner, because all these books are for beginners, to understand the single elements that make up a sentence, because that's fundamentally at the core of the syntax or the syntactical structure of every language. Couple of other notes. These are the special assimil. I have Le Nouvel Italien sans peine. So this is Italian. This is my native language. You might be wondering, Luca, do you want to learn Italian? Do you want to refresh your Italian? This is my ex-French girlfriend who bought this book, and she used my bidirectional translation and she learned Italian really well. Not just because she used the bidirectional translation, but because she was really good, really passionate about Italian. She came here, she lived here, we were together, and it was a beautiful story of her, of a French girl learning Italian. This is a book that I bought in Germany, as you can see here, Norwegisch ohne Mühe, and I've never actually learned Norwegisch or Norwegian, but I bought it because I really liked it. It has this hardcover that is typical of the Assimil version in Germany. I don't know why. It's really elegant. I really like it, so that's the reason why I bought it. And a couple of other mentions, there's, I really like small, grammar, like this is advanced grammar, German. And what I really like is that it's not just a bunch of rules. It's really interesting because it's alphabetical and it explains in detail, certain things that are really important to speak German correctly. So it's not boring. It's one of the few boring grammar books that I've used. So that's great. And then here we have some other resources. These are for my language exams, TOEFL IBT that I used to pass the exam. This is another one that you can see that is to prepare the C2 exam in German. And this is maybe the most interesting book of the entire bookshelf, which is, this is part 2. I have also part 1 somewhere, but the concept is the same. You can see Roma Eterna. What is so interesting about this? Well, it's, as you can see from the first page, I'm going to show you in a second. What is amazing about this book is that you can learn a foreign language just by using that foreign language. So the difference between this and all the other books that you see here is that all these books have somehow a way for you to understand the target language. Either it's bilingual texts or it's a vocab section at the end. This one doesn't have anything of the sort. You just have the text, and then you have some, clarifications also in Latin. So everything is written in Latin, but with context and, images, you can actually amazingly understand the language itself. And if you can create or use a content like this, bingo, you can just learn like children would and have their own native language. So you have a version in Greek as well, and this is the way to go when it comes to learning dead and live languages. And with this, I think we have finished the tour. There's other things here, but I think this video is long enough. I hope you watched it until the end. If you watched it until the end, thank you so much. The last thing I wanted to say is that go and check in the description box and in the comment section. I've left a link where I'm going to go more in depth into all this stuff. If you want to have more information, if you're looking for ways of learning a new language from scratch, you will find the resources and also how to use them. A lot of details. So please don't forget to check the link in the description box. Thank you, everyone. Happy language learning, and I'll see you in the next video.